pas d'auto, je n'ai pas de vélo, les trams sont en grève. Et je dois aller voir ma petite poupée, et les heures sont brèves. Il y a déjà 3 heures que je balade mon cœur le long des boulevards. Pour mieux me faire voir.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the first real 2013 Quinntopia N-Scale train review. Today we have something a little bit different, as you already noticed. We're going to be reviewing a train from Belgium. This is an SNCB NMBS, depending on if you use the French or Dutch, Flemish or Wallonian version of the railway's name. Belgium is a dual language country, so they have to identify the railroad in 2 ways. But anyway, I'm going to call it the SNCB. This is an SNCB HLE 18 or Class 18. I tried to discover, it's often called the HLE 18. I tried to discover what that meant, but I really wasn't successful. It is a Hobbytrain, as you can see from the box here. And this is Hobbytrain model number H2966. Vectron Class 18 SNCB. So there you go. This is not my first Hobbytrain locomotive, but it is my first Hobbytrain locomotive in their new packaging and new branding. And I have to say, I think the new branding by Hobbytrain looks really slick. And I don't know if you noticed this. Look at that Hobbytrain. What do you notice there in that logo? H-O-N. Kind of clever. I like the packaging. It looks pretty slick. It is also interesting that this model, which I presume is actually probably completely packaged, manufactured, and so forth by Hobbytrain's long relationship with Kato, is very different than this model, which is the packaging is anyway, which is my model of the G2000 locomotive, which I will cover in a different review, and you can't see it because of all the bubble wrap and stuff in there. So stay tuned for a G2000 SNCF logo in the locomotive review in the future. So here we are, the Hobbytrain HLE 18 in the SNCB livery. Interesting. This is, I'll take it out of the little sleeve here. UK fans will notice the sleeve approach, which is very British. As you take the sleeve out, a couple of things fall out of the packaging. You have your instructions, this time in color. How about that? So, how about that color? As you can tell, this is really a rebranding or repackaging of Kato's Vectron locomotive, which is part of the Euro Sprinter family. And they didn't even update the graphics for the instructions, which I don't care because it's all the same. You get your nice exploded view, all the different parts, and what the part numbers are. My one complaint, it's great to have all these parts identified in case something breaks or something falls off. That's fantastic. The bad part is it's really not very simple to replace them. I'm sure if I lived in Germany and there was a Hobbytrain office around the corner from me, it'd be easy, but I found it a little difficult on those occasions when I have had to replace something to actually find the right people who can get me the parts. Although some of the hobby shops have been really helpful. And of course, here's your order form in case you do lose a part. So there you go, right there. Look at that. They give you an order form. So the best thing of all, don't lose anything. Don't lose any parts. So here we are, the HLE 18, packaged in, again, another nice jewel case. This one's a little bit different, only goes down halfway. Not used to that. Usually Fleischmann and Minitrix and other Kato locomotives go all the way down, so that's interesting. And there it is, wrapped in the traditional cellophane, surrounded by foam, nicely protected. I'll lift it out by the cellophane, set the packaging aside, and we'll set the logo up. Loco, not logo. There we go. Now, I'll get this out of the way a little bit more. Now I'll zoom in here real close, but the one thing I want to remark on before I go too much further is how I think unique this locomotive is, because even though it really is a rebranding, a repainting of the Vectron locomotives Kato made, Kato Hobbytrain produced a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, It's really the first Belgian locomotive we've seen in N scale in a long time. And despite what you might think, yes, the Thalys can be considered a Belgian train, certainly. But really, we haven't seen anything in a Belgian outline and a Belgian livery in a long time. Really, I have to go back to these old days, these old N-gauge locomotives from Roco. This is the class 59. It is in the Belgian color scheme. I actually have it a little bit weathered, very lightly weathered. I installed the DCC decoder, and it runs about how you'd expect a 25-year-old Roco locomotive to run. It's a little bit rough, loud, and cranky. But that's a uniquely Belgian locomotive. It's a diesel locomotive. Interestingly enough, the class 59s, I actually have another one. I'll show you this one. This is in a different color scheme, as you can tell, and it's has not been converted. I have another version of this actually that has been converted. This one I'm keeping just in the traditional DC analog only. But you have to go back quite a few years before Belgian really got a whole lot of respect from the model train manufacturing community until today, I guess, with the HLE 18. Oh yes, the Series 59 I was going to mention. The fun fact about the Series 59 is it was made in partnership with Baldwin Locomotive Works in the U.S. I believe it was Baldwin. Well, I'm going to feel stupid if it's, yeah, it was not Alco, it wasn't GM. So it was Baldwin, yeah. So probably a lot like Alco in its last days in the U.S. They tried to keep their business alive by exporting or working a lot outside the U.S. And at least in the 50s, Baldwin found a little bit of success with these locomotives in Belgium. So that's enough of the old days, the old Roco packaging and locomotives of Belgium from the old times. Let's take a closer look. So the SNCB Class 18 or HLE 18 is part of the Siemens Eurosprinter family. This is unusual for the SNCB, as typically they'd always order their locomotives, well, this is their first Siemens order. Typically they always ordered them from, I think it was AEC and Alstom. And so this is their first time they've gone outside of that family for a locomotive. And here's the Hobbytrain interpretation of it. And it looks good from a distance. I was actually surprised at one thing. Having seen photos of this online, I never really looked too deeply at it, but I thought that this black section here was actually a vent. But it's not. It's not here on the model, and it's not on the prototype, but it's a plain painted glossy black section, which is kind of unusual. And I have to tell you, I'm going to bring the locomotive a little bit closer, see if you can see it. I like the paint scheme. It's an unusual, very modern, clean, elegant paint scheme with the yellow, the gray, the red and blue stripes, the gray logo, the B there in the circle, the oval. It looks quite nice, and of course you got the red pantographs and roof details, of course. It has a very nice, elegant, modern, clean look to it, and it looks good in model form as well. It looks just as good as the real thing. Now, I am going to point out something I'm not too happy with about this locomotive. Get a little pointer. On the HLE 18, there's obviously a door here with a window. There's a window. Hey, that's not a window. No, it's printed on. Let me see how close I can get. That's not actually a cast detail. That's a printed on decal, whatever, of a window. That's kind of annoying. Alright, you can tell here the handrails are just cast on. There's no separately applied handrails. Let's look at the front of it a little bit closer. See if there's anything else here that might be a little bit odd. So you can see the front, it's nice, sloping, very modern, contemporary windshield. And then these headlights, which look great. They're LEDs, by the way. But then what's this? Is that printed on vents? It is printed on vents. That's kind of annoying. Today's standards, I just don't feel like that's really the best that a manufacturer can do. But that's what we got with this model, and as it is the representative of the sole modern Belgian locomotive ever, at least ever by a major manufacturer, I guess we're happy that we get what we can. Now, well, I'm picking on those, I think, considerable flaws. It doesn't bother me enough that I wouldn't want the locomotive. I knew about this before I bought it. But it does feel annoying that they didn't try harder. The detail and the printing here is just fantastic. Look at that fine printing. You, of course, can't read it on this video, but that's just exceptional detail and printing, and that's just what we expect today, and they did a nice job with it. The bogies, the depth on the bogies looks good. A little bit shiny, of course, because they're plastic, and the wheels themselves have those interesting Siemens sort of almost white with little holes in there. I don't know what that is, but I like it. Every time I see it on one of these Siemens locomotives, Euro Sprinter class, I think that looks cool. So that's the locomotive. It looks good. Converting to DCC was fairly simple. I'll go ahead and back out and we'll see how easy it is to open up. Converting this locomotive to DCC is fairly simple because it does come with the previously standard NEM 651 socket and dummy plug, and all you need to do is replace that dummy plug in the NEM 651 socket, replace it with a decoder, and you're good to go. But first, before you do that, you need to take the shell off to get to the interior where the NEM socket is. So let's, in real time, see how easy it is to take this shell off. Well, there comes the pantograph. Again, it's standard deal is you're going to lift out gently on the sides of the shell, and that was it. It came out really nice. It was snug, but it came off really nice and came right off. No feeling that you're going to break the shell. So there it is. There's the interior. This is your pretty standard looking guts of any locomotive today. There's the decoder. That is a I believe I put a Digiterax DZ125IN in here. That's what I wrote down. But that doesn't look like a oh, sorry, you can't see it. That doesn't look like a Digiterax decoder, so I'll have to double check that. But that's what I wrote down I installed, and for some reason to me, that doesn't look like a Digiterax decoder. I always thought they had them wrapped up in that heat shrink stuff. Anyway, so as you can tell, fairly easy to take the shell off. It pops off nicely. It's not on there too tight. When we talk about the G2000 in a future review, we'll have a different story. There was a little bug. And now we'll put it back on, and fortunately that's generally fairly straightforward. Just slide it over the chassis, make sure it's centered, and snaps right into place. And there we go. Let's do a sound check, and then we'll do a review, a summary of what we think of it. And then we'll have some video of this thing running around the layout, and see how that works out for us. And now the sound check for the HLE 18 from the SNCB made by Hobbytrain. Ambient sounds usually around 6 to 9 decibels. Let's add 10 volts and see what this HLE 18 does at 10 volts. It's actually pretty loud. 34 to 38 is on the high end for 10 volts. I'm curious what it's going to do when we turn it up to 15. So here we go. 15 volts, full power. Wow. 42, 43, maybe 45. That's pretty loud. That is actually quite loud. Interesting. A little bit of loudness there from the Hobbytrain HLE 18. And now it's time for the report card for the Hobbytrain HLE 18. So how did they do? Here we are with the Quinntopia report card, and of course I am still missing my clipboard, so for now we'll be using my cutting pad. So looking at the categories that I arbitrarily have chosen and use my own logic for how I score, how did this train do? Well, this is a tough one. I generally have found that as I think back on my past reviews, nearly every locomotive or train has gotten a 4 or 5 on appearance. But I think this time, given that this is 2013 and that Hobbytrain took the cheap route, the cop-out of printing on vents and windows, that has to be acknowledged for the substandard that we expect from our trains today. So if I was to give this a 4 or 5, I would be remiss. It still looks great though, and I think if you can get past the printed on vents and windows, which is tough, it'll be a totally adequate, fine locomotive. And to be quite honest, if Hobbytrain had to actually remold the chassis to be precisely accurate to match the Belgian model, we probably would never have seen this. So this is the best we get. Nonetheless, I'm going to give it a 2 on appearance. It would be a 1, but it looks great. The printing and decaling that is on it is fantastic. I'm tempted to give it a 3 just because of that. But if somebody had seen one of my videos, heard a great score, and then got it and found, wow, that's kind of cheap. They printed on these vents or printed on this window, I wouldn't feel right about that. So I got to give them the low score. In terms of performance, it performs great. It hasn't had a lot of time on the layout. Generally, before I do my reviews, I have a couple of operating sessions or running sessions with the trains, and it certainly has been no problem. It's a bit loud, so I'm only going to give it a 4 for performance. Conversion, super easy. The chassis came off, as I showed you in this video, really easily. NEM651, standard plug. It's a cheap decoder. You can get them all over the place, and darn it, I wish they would have stayed with this standard, not all these confusing new formats. So very easy. Cost wasn't certainly extremely cheap, but wasn't pricey either. I'm going to give it a 4. I'm tempted to give it a bonus point because it is a Belgian locomotive, and I will do that just because it's Belgian, and I'm feeling somewhat magnanimous today. So anyway, we end up with a score of 16. Which, if you average it out across the 5, well, if you include that, bonus points don't get averaged in. That's just the way I do it. It's a 4 total, which is pretty good. But considering it would have done a lot better if they had actually cast in those details, the vent and the window, you'd be looking at a really nice model. But instead, it's an okay model, but certainly adequate and certainly fills a gap in the N-scale world by producing a Belgian locomotive. So that's the HLE 18. Stay tuned because after I get done talking, I'll show you some video of this little locomotive running around my layout. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, please feel free to subscribe, put a comment in, let me know who you are. A lot of times I can't find your website or your blog or your videos unless you comment. So please feel free to jump in and join the conversation. I always love to hear from new people. Thank you so as always. Sorry, I can't speak, but thanks as always for watching. Goodbye.